Hello, dear learners. I welcome you all to this MOOC on rural development in India. In this video, we shall discuss Unit 23 of Module 7, which is titled as Rural Infrastructure and Connectivity. In the previous unit, dear learners, we have discussed about rural basic services like housing, sanitation, so on and so forth. And in this unit, we shall discuss about rural infrastructure and connectivity, where we'll talk about the importance of connectivity, the importance of roads, the importance of network in rural areas, what comprises of rural infrastructure and connectivity, and what are the major challenges in rural infrastructure and connectivity as we see in India today. Finally, we shall also discuss about some of the major schemes regarding rural infrastructure and connectivity in India. So, dear learners, we all know that India is predominantly a rural country with 2/3 of its population residing in rural areas. These regions form the backbone of the Indian economy, contributing significantly to agriculture, allied activities, cottage and small-scale industries, and also increasingly to service and non-farm employment. Despite its significant contribution to the nation's economy, despite its critical importance, rural India has historically been deprived or historically has left behind urban centers in terms of infrastructure and connectivity. Inadequate roads, unreliable electricity, limited digital access, poor healthcare and education facilities, and weak market linkages have constrained rural development and perpetuated socio-economic inequalities in the rural areas. Rural infrastructure and connectivity, dear learners, are very important for rural development. They are critical drivers of inclusive growth, poverty reduction, and social transformation of the rural areas in particular and the nation at large. Now, what is meant by infrastructure? Infrastructure, in simple words, refers broadly to the physical and organizational resources or structures that are needed for smooth functioning of a particular society, such as roads, bridges, electricity, water supply, sanitation, telecommunication, school, healthcare facilities, so on and so forth. And these are utmost necessary for our day-to-day survival, for our basic, living. So all of these that comprise the basic necessities for our survival, for our smooth day-to-day functioning, for our overall growth, for our development, for our well-being. So these are called infrastructure. And by connectivity, we often mean or we refer to the ways in which people, goods, informations and services are linked or connected to one another within rural areas as well as between rural to urban regions. Urban centers often enjoyed concentrated public and private investment in infrastructure and connectivity. Be it roads, be it buildings, be it other infrastructures, we see urban centers flourishing in terms of infrastructural development, while India's rural areas frequently face persistent deficits that constrain growth opportunities and perpetuate inequalities. And in this unit, dear learners, we shall discuss the multifaceted dimensions of rural infrastructure and connectivity, their impacts on socio-economic development, challenges in implementation of infrastructure and connectivity schemes or projects, then various government initiatives, so on and so forth. And by exploring all of these issues, we'll be able to understand the issue of rural infrastructure and connectivity, not merely as mere technical issues or technical terms, but rather how we'll be able to understand how they are deeply interconnected to the issues of equity, sustainability, and human well-being. Let us begin our, discussion with by understanding the significance of rural infrastructure. Rural infrastructure comprises of physical structures and facilities that enable basic human activities and economic functions in non-urban regions or in the rural areas. These include roads and transportation systems, energy and power networks, water supply and sanitation systems, telecommunication and digital networks, irrigation and agricultural facilities, market and storage, health and educational institutions, and also financial access point. Dear learners, one of the most important role of infrastructure is the economic role. Infrastructure stimulates economic activity by reducing transaction cost, enhancing productivity, and creating employment. Efficient rural roads lowers the cost of transporting agricultural produce in the rural areas to the markets. Then, reliable electricity enhances small scale industrial activities, agro processing, and cottage industries. Then, irrigation infrastructure ensures water availability, enabling farmers to shift from rain fed agriculture to more productive and diversified cropping patterns, so on and so forth. So, when we talk about infrastructure, it has a very strong role in the economy. If there is good infrastructure, it supports and facilitates economic growth, it supports the production process, and it supports the prosperity, or it paves way to economic prosperity. While on the other hand, the areas that lack infrastructure, that do not have proper transport infrastructure, that do not have proper electricity, that do not have required infrastructural support for agriculture, so on and so forth, always lags behind, and it affects their the well-being of the people, their economic conditions, so on and so forth. And in those regions we will see that people suffer more from poverty, from scarcity, from deprivation, so on and so forth. So infrastructure is very important when we talk about economy. Next is that infrastructure has another important role, that is its social impact. When we talk about social development, we mean schools, health facilities, clean water and sanitation, so on and so forth. And infrastructure facilitates social development. Schools equipped with classrooms, books, electricity, and internet access improves learning outcomes of the students. Similarly, healthcare infrastructure, including clinics, trained personnel, and diagnostic tools, enhances community health and reduces mortality rate. Clean water and sanitation infrastructure are vital for public health and greatly reduce waterborne diseases. So, for overall or for providing a healthy environment, and similarly for education also we need infrastructure. So, these infrastructure has a tremendous social impact. Better the infrastructure, better is the condition of the people. In those regions where there is good infrastructure, good schools, good health facilities, we see better living conditions, better way of life of the people living in those areas. So, these are the key roles, that is the economic and social role that infrastructure plays. Now, let us try to understand what is meant by connectivity. Dear learners, we must understand that while infrastructure refers to built environment, connectivity describes how effectively infrastructure links people and places. Connectivity spans across transportation networks, digital communications, and socio-economic linkages that connect rural population to wider markets, informations, and services. Dear learners, physical connectivity comprises transportation systems such as roads, bridges, railways, waterways, and public transport networks. In rural areas, high quality road networks reduce travel time, facilitate access to market and services, and improve safety. Connectivity also includes last mile access, ensuring that the remote villages are not bypassed by major highways but are instead linked through feeder roads and rural transport services. So, physical connectivity implies, the transport systems basically, that the roads, the bridges that we have that connect all the regions together. Even the remotest of the villages are connected to the other areas, to the other regions. So roads and railways and waterways and other means of public transport are therefore very, very important and crucial for the survival of human beings and also for the functioning of a society. Now, another important connectivity that we talk about is the digital connectivity. Dear learners, with the booming of the digital world, or digital connectivity, access to mobile networks, internet services have become very, very important. So they are no longer a luxury, but kind of, a regular, has gradually become a kind of regular necessity for people. Now, digital connectivity, in simple terms, it means access to mobile networks, broadband internet, and digital services, and it has gradually become indispensable in the 21st century. It enables access to information, then online education, telehealth services, online e-commerce, agricultural supports, financial technologies such as mobile banking, digital payments, so on and so forth. And all of these have become a very, very significant part of our everyday life. Now, limited digital connectivity isolates rural communities from modern economic opportunities. Another, type of connectivity apart from the physical and the digital connectivity, that is economic and social connectivity. Though economic and social connectivity does not directly fall under the purview of what we are discussing today, or under the purview of the course in general, but still, because we are talking about connectivity, let us briefly understand about what we mean by economic and social connectivity. So basically, economic connectivity refers to access to markets, supply chains, and financial systems, and social connectivity refers to the strength of networks between individuals and communities. Investments in economic connectivity and social connectivity helps in fostering resilience, innovation, and inclusive growth. Now, dear learners, let us try to discuss about the major components of rural infrastructure and connectivity. When we are talking about the different types of rural connectivity, we mentioned about the physical connectivity, the first one that is very, very important. And when we talk about physical connectivity, we all understand that transport network becomes the most important component. So, one of the major components of rural infrastructure and connectivity is the transportation network. Transport infrastructure is the backbone of rural connectivity. It includes all vehicles, roads, bridges, ferries, and public transport systems, facilitating the movement of people and goods. The second important component is rural roads and highways. Rural roads are often unpaved and poorly maintained and are also prone to seasonal disruptions. This limits access to markets, schools, hospitals, and employment centers. And therefore, upgrading these rural roads into all-weather roads, or, into proper, roads, so that, people can freely or conveniently travel across the regions is very, very important. And it is also equally important to integrate rural roads to the regional highways, so that it will be able to reduce the isolation of the rural areas, or it will be able to do away with the isolation that the rural areas face, and thereby providing the rural population with more opportunities, and giving them wider access to the markets, to healthcare institutions, to educations, to employment opportunities, so on and so forth. Another, when we talk about component of rural infrastructure, is the public transport services. In many rural areas in the country, there is very, very limited formal public transport service. Residents often, we see that they rely on informal modes such as shared taxis, motorbikes, or walking. So, public transport services, are very, very important for, giving greater access to people. And government needs to support affordable and reliable transport services that links the villages to towns and urban centers. Only then these villages will develop in the real sense of the term. We also have energy and power infrastructure as one of the major components, where access to electricity, we all know, can transform rural economies. It enables mechanized farming, refrigeration, agro processing, lighting for schools, homes, digital connectivity, so on and so forth. Electrification and energy power sources are very, very important for rural development. And in the subsequent unit, that is unit 24, we shall delve deeper into the issues of rural energy and electrification. Then another major component of rural infrastructure and connectivity is water, sanitation, and irrigation. Clean water supply, sanitation infrastructure, so on and so forth, and even irrigation are very, very vital for the lives of the rural people. It not only supports the health and enables people to live with dignity, but it is also deeply interconnected to productive livelihoods. In areas which do not have proper irrigation facilities, people suffer from lack of irrigation supplies for their agricultural productivity. Similarly, in areas that do not have clean water and sanitation facilities, people suffer from various health issues. So these are very, very important for development and well-being of rural population. Now, another major component of rural infrastructure and connectivity is digital and telecommunication infrastructure. Dear learners, in an increasingly digital world, connectivity through mobile networks and broadband is critical. So, there is a need, or, cellular networks or mobile network expansion has become need of the day, and it has rapidly expanded and increased rural connectivity. Mobile phones have facilitated easier communication, banking, and access to information. So, mobile network expansion has become very, very significant for the rural population, just like the urban counterparts, and it has provided very multifaceted kind of opportunities to the rural people. Another, if we see a component of digital infrastructure, is the broadband and internet access. Reliable broadband expands access to education, healthcare, markets, and government services. Bridging digital divide is essential for equity in economic opportunities. Other components such as market storage, financial services, so on and so forth, and these are also equally important part or component of rural infrastructure. So, dear learners, by now we have understood what is meant by infrastructure, what is meant by connectivity, why is rural infrastructure important, why is rural connectivity important, and what are the key components of rural infrastructure and connectivity. Let us now try to understand the impact of rural infrastructure and connectivity. The impact when we talk about of rural infrastructure and connectivity, in this part of our early discussion, we have mentioned how rural infrastructure and connectivity actually helps rural population. Let us now try to examine these in a slightly more detailed manner. The first impact of rural infrastructure and connectivity is economic growth and employment. Dear learners, we have already mentioned that rural infrastructure plays a key role in boosting economic growth. Better roads, better transport facilities, electricity and digital connectivity helps farmers and small producers to reach market more easily. It reduces transportation and production cost and increased profit. Dear learners, we know that the major chunk of the rural population depends on agriculture for their livelihood, and therefore transport facilities and roads are very very important for them, because to for marketing their products or for getting raw materials, roads are important. Similarly, electricity and digital connectivity is also important for the economic growth and prosperity of the rural population. Improved infrastructure also encourages private investment by making rural areas more accessible and business friendly. Only when there is proper rural infrastructure, only when there are proper good all weather roads and connectivity, only then private players or the corporate houses will be interested to make investments in the rural areas. More industries will come up, more factories will come up, and that might create more employment opportunities and livelihood avenues for rural population. Therefore, infrastructure is very important for economic growth and development. The construction, operation, and maintenance of infrastructure creates employment opportunities for local people. In addition, improved connectivity attracts industries, services, and small enterprises to the rural regions, thereby leading to new jobs and income sources. And therefore, dear learners, rural economies in this way becomes more diversified, thereby moving beyond agriculture and beyond agriculture into areas such as manufacturing, trade, and services. Therefore, rural infrastructure and connectivity is very important for economic development. Now, the next impact is poverty reduction. Dear learners, we all understand that more the economic growth, more the economic prosperity, there will be less and less of poverty. More and more people will have better living conditions, better socio-economic conditions. Therefore, rural infrastructure, by helping in economic growth, in economic development, can play a significant role in reducing poverty. Rural infrastructure can play a critical role in reducing poverty by improving access to markets, basic services, and information. Better roads allow people to sell their products at fair prices and access jobs, schools, and healthcare more easily. Reliable electricity and internet connectivity open up new livelihood opportunities such as small businesses, online services, and skill based work. Similarly, access to banking, credit, and digital financial services help rural families save money, handle emergencies, invest in farming, or in small businesses. There are various studies which have shown that better rural infrastructure reduces poverty by allowing more people to take part in economic activities and earn better incomes from these activities. Another major impact of rural infrastructure and connectivity is social equity and inclusion. Infrastructure improves access to education, healthcare, and jobs, thereby helping to reduce the gap between urban and rural areas. Good roads and transport make it easier for students to attend schools and colleges, patients to reach hospitals, and workers to find employment opportunities. Better connectivity also empowers women and other marginalized groups by increasing their mobility, access to information, and chances to earn an income. Digital networks allow people to access government schemes, learn about their rights, and use online platforms to express their views. Overall, improved infrastructure promotes social inclusion and helps create more equal opportunities for the rural communities. Lastly, another major impact of a rural infrastructure and connectivity is increase in agricultural productivity and food security. Rural infrastructure such as irrigation systems, farm machinery, storage facilities, and access to markets help in increasing agricultural productivity. Reliable irrigation ensures steady crop yields, while mechanization reduces labor effort and saves time. Proper storage facilities helps farmers to preserve their produce and avoid post-harvest losses. Efficient transport networks reduce spoilage and allows farmers to sell their produce at better prices. Digital and communication connectivity gives farmers access to agricultural advisories, weather updates, and market information. All of these help them to adapt improved farming methods and climate smart practices, thereby strengthening food security and farm incomes. So, dear learners, all of these, are the impacts of rural infrastructure and connectivity. The better the infrastructure and connectivity, we will have better economic, we'll have economic growth, there will be reduction in poverty, there will be, more social equity and inclusion, and better agricultural income, agricultural productivity, and food security. Now, dear learners, let us try to understand the challenges that we observe in rural infrastructure and connectivity in our country today. That infrastructure and connectivity are often poorly developed in rural areas due to limited financial resources, difficult terrain, and low population density, which make these projects costly and less profitable. Governments and private investors tend to focus more on urban areas where returns are quicker and higher. Weak planning, poor maintenance, and lack of local technical capacity also slows development. In addition, issues such as land acquisition, inadequate coordination between agencies, and limited community participation further hinder the growth of rural infrastructure. Now, let us discuss these major infrastructural constraints or the major challenges in infrastructure and connectivity in rural areas in details. The first constraint or the first challenge is the financial constraint. Funding large infrastructure projects is expensive, and in rural areas with lower population densities and limited revenue generations, these areas often receive lesser investment because there is not much of return from these areas, or the population is very very scarce. Therefore, these areas tend to receive lesser attention in terms of infrastructure projects, in terms of developing infrastructure or infrastructural facilities in those regions. Another challenge is the geographic and environmental barriers. Many rural regions in the country are very very remote, mountainous, flood prone, or have difficult terrain, thereby making construction and maintenance very very expensive. Climate change intensifies this risk through extreme weather, flooding, landslides, and droughts, damaging infrastructure and thereby increasing cost. So, the regions that, are in difficult terrains, or, that are very, very remote, there you will see lack of infrastructural support. There, you will see lack of infrastructure. You will not find many good roads. You may not find good schools, hospitals, and other infrastructural facilities. So, geography and environmental constraints or barriers are one of the major challenges of rural infrastructure and connectivity. Then another challenge is institution and governance issues, where weak planning, limited technical capacity, corruption, inadequate implementation, inefficient procurement processes, so on and so forth, undermine the infrastructure quality. Project delays, cost overruns, and insufficient maintenance, often, leads to infrastructural challenges in the rural areas. So, these bureaucratic issues, or lack of proper implementation of the schemes, lack of proper monitoring of the schemes and the services, then all of these actually can cause infrastructural delays, or lack of infrastructures in the remote regions of the country. Then another major challenge is maintenance and sustainability. Dear learners, we need to understand that building in infrastructure is only one part of the challenge. But then maintaining this infrastructure, maintaining roads, energy systems, water supplies, networks, digital infrastructures, so on and so forth, requires ongoing, continuous investment in terms of money, in terms of technical resources, so on and so forth. Then another major challenge is equity and distributional gap. We see that infrastructure investment seems to be often uneven, leaving remote, poorer regions behind. Within rural communities, gender disparities and marginalization persist. So these kind of issues are there. There is undoubtedly, we see that there is deprivation, there is discrimination, but then now we see development policies becoming more and more inclusive, and roads are turning, there are more constructions of roads, and linking of rural areas to urban areas. But despite these initiatives and efforts, there are still regions which lag behind and still face infrastructural challenges. So, dear learners, all of these are the major challenges of rural infrastructure and connectivity. And let us now try to understand, or briefly talk about or discuss about the major government schemes and initiatives in terms of infrastructure and connectivity in India. One of the major scheme, or popular scheme, is the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, PMGSY, and this scheme aims to connect unconnected villages with good all-weather roads, improving access to markets, schools, and healthcare. Then we have the Sansad Adarsh Gram Yojana, and under this programs, members of parliament help develop selected villages into model villages with improved infrastructure and basic services. Another initiative is the Smart Village Initiative, which focuses on holistic development, including infrastructure, livelihoods, digital access, so on and so forth, to make villages more self-reliant. Then when we talk about digital connectivity, there is the BharatNet, or National Broadband Mission, which expands high-speed broadband and internet connectivity to the Gram Panchayats and beyond, thereby bridging the digital divide that exists in India. Then we have the Digital Bharat Nidhi and telecom expansion, which are provided to set up mobile towers and expand network coverages so that even the remote rural habitations get mobile and internet access. So, dear learners, these are some of the major schemes and initiatives to improve rural infrastructure and connectivity in rural India. Though there have been multiple efforts being made to connect the rural areas to the mainstream, to connect the rural areas to the national highways, and to bring in more opportunities to the rural people and the population. But still we see there are areas which still have challenges, which still faces challenges in terms of infrastructure and connectivity. And we can only say that rural infrastructure and connectivity are actually indispensable elements for rural development. If we need rural areas to develop, rural infrastructure and connectivity must be developed. Only then rural areas can develop in the real sense of the term. Investment in roads, energy, water, digital systems, and social services can transform rural economies, reduce poverty, increase productivity, and improve quality of life. Further, connectivity like physical, digital, and economic links rural communities to opportunities, markets, and knowledge, thereby breaking cycles of isolation and separation. However, these gains are not automatic. There are challenges, as we have discussed in this video. There are a number of challenges like financial, geographic, institutional, technological, so on and so forth. And to overcome these challenges, there is the need for integrated policy responses, financing, proper implementation, monitoring, community participation and engagement, so on and so forth. And only then, with goodwill, vision, and support and active participation of all the stakeholders, and proper financing and planning, we can have better rural infrastructure, better connectivity for the rural areas, and only then the rural areas will prosper. We hope this video will be helpful for you. Thank you.